Hello everyone, I'm Sale, and this is the video recap for the Team Liquid Legacy Star League Round of 8. In our first match, we had Polish Zerg South Park playing against Hungarian Terran Invite Skyline. Game 1 opened with a 9-pool speed from South Park, but Skyline, seeming to know that his opponent intended to go for 9 pools, decided to go for a 2 racks in base. Skyline was then able to easily hold off the 2 Zerging attacks, while South Park went for mutas. South Park then decided to try and catch up by going for a crazy Zerg strategy, rushing straight to Hive from his Mutalisks. Unfortunately for him, his Mutaling army wasn't able to hold off the Terran's first attack, and he was forced to GG. In Game 2 on Electric Circuit, Skyline decided to go for a Vulture drop versus the standard 3-hatch opening of South Park. Upon seeing his opponent going for Fast Factory, South Park decided to attack across the map with his Hydras, and miraculously was able to clear a lot of mines without taking a single casualty. The Hydras then arrived at Skyline's natural while there was barely any defense and started to break the front. At the same time, however, the Vulture drop entered South Park's main and slaughtered all but 4 drones. After some intense micro action, both players are able to clear out the attacks in their mains and stabilize, although South Park has a crippled economy. South Park decides to try and catch up by going for a double expand and a very unorthodox Mutalisk Hydralisk composition against the standard bio comp of Skyline. Unfortunately for South Park, he loses the first big engagement when his lurkers all get stuck on top of each other when they try to unburrow. He's eventually able to clean up the attack, but has lost too much of his army at that point and can't hold the second push. In Game 3, South Park again opens with a 9-pool speed, which Skyline, yet again, counters with a 2 racks in his base. Skyline moves out with an early Medic Marine attack to put some pressure on the Zerg, but South Park's Sunkens are up in time, and his subsequent Muta Harass does some good damage against the Terran. When Skyline moves out for a second time with a much bigger force, he is caught out of position going for the Zerg's third and is completely crushed by the Mutaling army of South Park. Now that he's in a good position, South Park decides to go straight for Guardians and begins morphing a control group of them right behind the Terran's natural. Unfortunately for him, Skyline notices the clumped Guardian cocoons, and in a huge move does a quadruple eraser that eliminates every single one of them. Having lost his entire Guardian force, South Park can no longer stop the Terran advance and is forced to GG. So our first player into the semifinals is our Terran Invite Skyline, advancing 3-0 over South Park. Our next match is American Zerg Invite Michael versus Peruvian Terran Terror. In Game 1, Michael immediately lived up to his name of Cheese King by going for a 7-pool Sunken Rush, building a hatchery at Terror's natural. Terror had opened with a quick factory and tried a Vulture run by past the Sunkens, which was somewhat successful, but well defended by Michael. However, Terror's 4 racks bio pump off 1 base is able to easily kill the proxy hatchery of Michael, putting him back down to 1 base. Michael then re-expands to his own natural and goes for Mutalisks, and despite having really good Mutalisk control, is unable to do enough damage and is forced to GG out. Game 2 opens relatively calmly with a standard 1 racks expand versus 3-hatch from Michael. Unfortunately for Terror, he decides to go straight for Valkyries to counter what he thinks will be a 3-hatch Muta build, but in fact Michael is going for Lurkers. Upon scouting the Lurkers, Terror plays defensively and is easily able to hold off an attempted attack at his back door. Terror does some good damage with dropships, but plays a little bit too defensively with his main army, allowing Michael to keep his position outside the Terran natural. When Michael eventually gets Defilers and Dark Swarms, he's able to swarm straight into Terror's natural and finish the game. In Game 3 on Ground Zero, Terror goes for a 1-fact expand versus a 3-hatch opening of Michael. While Terror isn't paying attention, Michael is able to surround the first Vulture and pick it off, taking away Terror's map awareness. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Michael then goes for a Speedling all-in and is able to just kill Terror off immediately. In Game 4, Terror once again opens with a factory, but then goes for a well-disguised 3 barracks, 1 factory all-in. Unfortunately for him, one of Michael's Zerglings is able to slip past his units and scout that there is no natural expansion for Terror. Sensing that the all-in is coming, Michael is easily able to defend with Sunken Colonies and Zerglings. Michael then counterattacks with his Mutalisks and eventually Lurkers, and forces a GG out of Terror. So, Michael advances to the semifinals 3-1 over Terror, and is our second invite in the semifinals. Our third match of the quarterfinals was Spanish Zerg Eon Zerg versus the Bulgarian random player Nemu. In Game 1, Nemu opened with an 8 racks bunker rush, which Eon Zerg was able to defend with his drones, although he took 4 drone casualties straight away. Eon Zerg then tries a counterattack with Zerglings, but this is easily defended by Nemu, putting Eon Zerg in a tricky situation. Eon Zerg then goes for 3-hatch Mutalisk with a cross-map expansion versus the fast +1 4 racks of Nemu. After a crazy game with lots of action and huge casualties on both sides, Eon Zerg's macro is eventually too strong and Nemu is forced to GG out. In Game 2, Nemu once again opens with the 8 racks bunker rush, and this time Eon Zerg's drones go the wrong way due to the pathing error on Electric Circuit. He is still miraculously able to defend the attack, and ends up going 3-hatch Lurkers against the +1 4 racks of the Terran. Eonzerg, however, then gets a little bit too aggressive and goes for 2 failed Lurker Ling attacks against the Terran Natural. After holding off the attacks with good Medic Marine control, Nemu takes the game. In Game 3, Nemu elects not to go for the Bunker Rush, and instead just goes for a standard 1-Rax expand. Eonzerg, on the other hand, opens with a 12 pull into 2 Hatch Muta. Just before the Mutas come out, Eonzerg goes for the very standard Speedling attack to try and clear as many Marines as possible. The attack turns out to be a lot more successful than he anticipated, and Eonzerg decides to turn his 2Hatch Muta into a Zergling all-in. After a ridiculous defense with Nemu barely holding on for several minutes, he eventually loses all of his barracks and is unable to produce any more units, forcing him to GG. In game number 4, Eonzerg decides to be the aggressor and opens with a 9 pull against what looks like a 1-Rax expand opening from Nemu. After holding off the Zergling attack, Nemu decides to go for a huge counterattack, pulling half of his SCVs to go with his Marines. Eonzerg, however, takes advantage of a great sunken positioning, is able to defend the attack, and then goes for a counter-contain with his Zerglings. He follows up with a 2-Hatch Muta, and on the back of his amazing Muta micro is able to take game number 4. So from our third quarterfinal, we have Eonzerg advancing 3-1 over Nemu. Our final match of the round of 8 was Russian Protoss player DeWalt versus Hungarian Zerg Siki. In game 1 we had standard openings from both players with a Forge Fast Expand versus a 3-basing Zerg. DeWalt then goes for 9 gateways off of his 2 bases, and takes map control with a huge Protoss army. Zika, however, takes advantage of all the different pathways on the map and does some good counterattacking with Speedling groups. When a big engagement finally happens, DeWalt shows some lackluster army control as well as having poor army composition, resulting in an overwhelming win for Ziki. Ziki then goes up to 5 bases versus DeWalt's 3 and constantly denies his 4th base. With DeWalt unable to expand, his army is eventually worn down and he's forced to GG. In game number 2, poor cannon positioning at DeWalt's wall allows Ziki to do a Zergling run-by into his main. Ziki is able to do a ton of damage with his 3 Speedlings, although DeWalt somewhat counters this by doing some good probe micro and delaying Ziki's 3rd. DeWalt then goes for a 6-gate Dragoon all-in, but Ziki is able to easily defend this with a Muta-Ling army and forces a GG out of the Protoss. In game 3, Ziki goes for a 9 pull into 3-Hatch Hydro Pressure, while DeWalt goes for fast +1 Speed Zealots. While holding off the Hydro attack, DeWalt goes for a DT drop in Ziki's main that kills off all of the drones as well as some tech structures. He then does a Storm drop at Ziki's 3rd and is able to kill most of the drones there as well. When the big 2-base attack finally comes, Ziki has taken too much damage and is unable to hold it off, giving DeWalt a win. In game 4 we once again had standard openings with a Forge Fast Expand versus a 3-base Zerg, but DeWalt then follows this up by going Corsair Reaver. DeWalt does a suicide attack with his first Reaver against Ziki's quick 4th base, but is unable to kill it. With Ziki now on 4 bases against DeWalt's 2 and having a nice macro advantage, he sends wave after wave of units to take down the Protoss 3rd. Despite being in a good defensive position, the Protoss army is eventually worn down, and Ziki takes the game. So our last player to advance to the semifinals will be Ziki, taking the series 3-1 over DeWalt. Our semifinal matches will be casted this Saturday at 21 CET with Skyline vs Michael and Eonzerg vs Ziki. Hope to see you guys all there.